Can we please just talk about this?
Into the Spider-Verse. Spider-Man No Way Home is big, it's epic, and it turns everybody's favorite web-slinger's whole life completely upside down. Well, more upside down than normal. You know what I mean. Directed by John Watts, this movie is jam-packed with heroes, villains, and heavy consequences that will alter Peter Parker and his universe forever. And we'll break down that whole ending. Plus, we think we may have an idea of when Spider-Man may finally face off with a certain sticky little symbiote. But before we get to any of that, I have to warn you, we are about to spoil all of Spider-Man No Way Home and where we think this is headed, so if you haven't seen the movie yet or you just don't want to know, now is the time to whip yourself out of here until we're done.
Well, I'll tell you what I call him. Public enemy number one!
Okay, now that we're past that spoiler warning, let's get right to the big stuff of the movie. Yes, all three Spider-Men are in it. Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire. No Uncle Ben's died in this movie, but Aunt May does. What the f- Doctor Strange isn't the Sorcerer Supreme. None of the Spideys or the villains die. Doctor Strange's spell is eventually reversed and everyone gets sent back to their original universes, including Venom. And in the end, nobody remembers who Peter Parker even is, so he ends the movie all alone, burdened with great responsibility. Okay, I know that is a lot all at once, so let's recap real quick to show how everything wound up that way. No Way Home picks up right after where Far From Home left off. Mysterio has revealed Peter Parker's identity to the whole world, giving way to a media circus that takes over the kid's life overnight. While Peter's vigilantism has disqualified him from college admissions across the board, it's not until MJ and Ned start getting rejected because of Spider-Man that he decides to visit his friendly neighborhood wizard for help. Against the advice of Sorcerer Supreme Wong, who got promoted during the blip, Doctor Strange casts a spell to make the world forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. But once Peter starts going overboard with the technicalities of who'll remember him, the spell spins out of control and Strange is forced to trap it in a pocket universe. With the spell now contained, Peter makes a last-ditch effort to catch a college admissions official before her flight, which is right when this guy shows up.
Hello, Peter.
Doc Ock attacks Peter thinking he's the same one he mentored in his own universe. But just as a familiar laugh rings through the smoke, Doctor Strange teleports Peter and Doc Ock to the Undercroft, the Sanctum Sanctorum's dungeon. Strange explains the botched spell was going to pull every person who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man from every universe, and that a few slipped in before he could stop it. He's already captured Curt Connors, a doctor who once mentored a version of Spider-Man before becoming the Lizard. Strange creates a gauntlet for Peter that's able to teleport the villains back to the Undercroft. The flashiest new piece of tech Peter's got at his disposal this time around. So with Doc Ock in custody, Peter swings to the Hudson Valley where they think Green Goblin is heading. Along the way, Peter encounters Electro and Sandman and sends both back to the Undercroft. That's 4 very sinister fellows down, 1 goblin to go. It doesn't take Peter long to find Norman Osborn, who shows up at the Feast homeless shelter that May runs, deeply confused and scared, the goblin voice in his mind having fractured his sanity. May helps Peter realize that Strange's plan to send these villains back to their universes, dooming them to their fates against Spider-Man, isn't the right thing to do. Instead, Peter turns Strange's portals against him to trap him at the Grand Canyon and goes to work curing the ailments fueling the villain's rage with the Stark Fabricator from Far From Home. Peter fixes Doc Ock's malfunctioning microchip, proving the rehab solution can work, but before he can help the others, Green Goblin overtakes Norman and goes berserk. Sandman, Electro, and the Lizard have second thoughts about reforming and the 4 of them flee. On the way out, the Goblin claims another victim, Aunt May, who in her dying breath tells Peter that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Even more than the sacrifice of his mentor Tony Stark, May's death is a watershed moment for the Wallcrawler. As in, he sheds a lot of water. Not as much as Tobey, but he's still pretty devastated all the same. If Peter's gonna stop these villains, he's going to need more help. More Peters. While experimenting with Doctor Strange's sling ring to find his Peter, Ned actually finds 2 variants of Peter Parker from the multiverse. A seasoned veteran and an amazing young man who's no stranger to the rage our Peter feels over May's death. The 3 Peters come together to finish rehabilitating the villains and thankfully assign themselves numbers so that we can keep them all straight. Holland's Peter 1, Maguire's Peter 2, and Andrew's Peter 3. For simplicity's sake, we're just gonna call Peter 1 Peter. They confront the villains at the Statue of Liberty, curing the villains one by one until only Green Goblin remains. Peter nearly exacts revenge on Goblin with the very glider that killed May, but his variants and friends pull him back from the edge before he does. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange has escaped his portal prison and is now struggling to close the rift in space-time. Peter realizes that in order to put things right, the entire world needs to forget who he is, even his loved ones. Strange reluctantly obliges, and after promising MJ he'll find her and make her remember him, Peter says his goodbyes and Strange wipes his existence from the collective consciousness. But when it comes time to reunite with MJ and Ned, Peter applies May's wisdom and makes the responsible choice to leave them without the dangerous knowledge of his superhero alter ego. He may have no way home, but Peter's learned all the lessons he needs to be the Spider-Man this world deserves, and in a shiny new suit that seems to pay homage to his variants. That's where Spidey's story ends, for now at least, but there's one multiversal miscreant left to check in on: Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock. Picking up from the post-credits scene of Venom Let There Be Carnage, Eddie and Venom are drinking in a tropical paradise and catching up on some of the superhero highlights of the last few years when they see Spider-Man on the news. Intrigued, they decide to pay him a visit just before Strange's spell sends them back to their universe. But wow, does he miss a spot. A piece of symbiote crawls away from the bar, promising that we haven't seen the last of Venom in the MCU. We know how hungry Venom gets, so it probably isn't going to take the symbiote long to track down a new host. Here are our top 3 predictions of who that unlucky soul could be. Number 1. Flash Thompson. Flash became Venom in the comics when he merged with the symbiote and became Agent Venom after losing his legs in military service. Flash has been in the MCU since Spider-Man Homecoming and has always been fascinated with Spider-Man's powers. Maybe he'll settle for a symbiote. Number 2. Peter. When the Venom symbiote was first introduced in the comics, it was an alien organism that crashed to Earth and bonded with Peter Parker. The result was a classic all-black symbiote suit. We know Peter's gonna be very lonely in his new life. He could have a friend in Venom. Maybe they just don't want to try and top Spider-Man 3. 3. Eddie Brock. Tom Hardy's iteration of the character is wildly popular, and with the multiverse at their disposal, Sony and Marvel could easily find a way to send Eddie back to the sacred timeline. Who knows, maybe Venom will travel to New York and encounter an Eddie Brock variant. No matter who ends up as the new host of Venom, the safe money's on Tom Hardy at least voicing the symbiote, even if he isn't playing the host.
I can't save everyone.
Venom's late appearance and quick exit means we never get a true Sinister Six on screen in No Way Home, but there were plenty of dastardly deeds to go around for the other 5. Here's a quick rundown of each of the villains' roles in No Way Home. Doctor Octopus. We first meet Dr. Otto Octavius on the George Washington Bridge when he attacks Peter. Otto was right in the middle of his climactic battle with Peter 2 when Strange's spell brought him to the sacred timeline. He's dead set on finishing his renewable energy machine with the fritzing chip on his tentacles giving them control over him, rather than the other way around. He's the first villain that Peter is able to cure and even helps the Spider-Men during their final fight. It's this redemption that convinces Peter that sending these people to their death is no longer an option, no matter the cost. Green Goblin. Just after Peter defeats Doc Ock, Green Goblin emerges from a cloud of smoke, but Peter's teleported away before he can confront him. The Goblin has fractured Norman's psyche, leaving the good-natured Osborn at his evil counterpart's mercy for much of the movie. But it's that very goodness that Aunt May hones in on, inspiring Peter to try and redeem him along with the other villains. Though Green Goblin commits a number of heinous acts in Osborn's name, Peter defeating him without killing him stands as a testament to the great power of goodness that May represented. Electro. Peter encounters Max in the Hudson Valley on his way to investigate Goblin's whereabouts. Max notes that the energy in our universe feels different before Spidey sends him to the Undercroft. Having been ridiculed all his life for his weakness, Max refuses to let go of his powers and is one of the villains who has to be forcefully cured. Sandman. Flint Marco's an ally at first, thinking that Peter 1 is really Peter 2 and helping him incapacitate Electro long enough to teleport him to the Undercroft. Seeing this and realizing this Spidey is a stranger to him, Marco begins to attack before he too is sent to the Undercroft. He's got a daughter back at home, so he bets on whichever side has the best shot of getting him back. For some reason, he goes with the Goblin Gang, though Peter 2 is able to cure him and send him back all the same. The Lizard. He's a talking lizard and he wants to force humankind to evolve into talking lizards so he can have other lizards to talk to. Peter 3 cures him and he's sent back to his world butt naked. And that's basically it for Lizard. Lots of villains to handle, someone's gotta get the short end of the stick. Oh, and if you're wondering where that post-credits talk we promised at the beginning is, well, the thing is, No Way Home's post-credits is actually just a trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Kind of the same way they teased the first Avengers movie at the end of Captain America: The First Avenger. Hang out with us through the Easter eggs and we'll run through that trailer in a minute. Speaking of Easter eggs, it wouldn't be a Marvel movie breakdown without going over all the Easter eggs we spotted. Here's what we got.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
That Norman Osborn line from Spider-Man inspired countless memes, and it pops up again in No Way Home, when Norman excitedly tells Peter that he still is something of a scientist himself. And speaking of memes, No Way Home has some fun adapting this one as Ned calls out for Peter, and all three spend about 10 full seconds explaining simultaneously that he's gonna need to be way more specific. During one of J. Jonah Jameson's broadcasts, a news alert scrolls underneath describing political turmoil in New Asgard, which sounds like it could be our first hint of Thor: Love and Thunder's plot. When we last left New Asgard, Thor had just named Valkyrie its ruler. Maybe the fabled warrior's not as popular a leader as Thor had hoped. Or maybe someone has it out for her. Flash Thompson has written a memoir called Flashpoint, a surprisingly on-the-nose nod to DC Comics' iconic Flash run of the same name, in which the Flash upends time and space in an attempt to go back in time and save his mother's life. License plates are always a good place to look for Easter eggs. The two we spotted were 12/28, Stanley's birthday, and 63 ASM plus 3, which seems to be a reference to issue 63 of The Amazing Spider-Man, in which Spidey has to fight not one but 2 vultures. Add 3 to that number of baddies and you've got yourself the same Sinister 5 that appear in the movie. We're sure there are more, let us know if you saw any in the comments. After Peter 3 cures Electro, Max laments that Spider-Man isn't black and that there must be a black Spidey out there somewhere in the multiverse. He's dead right, of course. We know at least one Miles Morales carrying the Spidey banner, and another who may be waiting in the wings, thanks to a reference from his Uncle Aaron in Homecoming.
I don't want those weapons in this neighborhood. I got a nephew who live here.
Even with all the returning Spider-Man stars, the biggest surprise cameo comes right from inside the MCU itself. After Peter's questioned by the Department of Damage Control, it's revealed that he's got himself an attorney, Daredevil himself, Matt Murdock. When the blind Murdock catches a brick sent into the Parkers' living room and Peter asks how that's possible, Matt quips that's because he's a very good lawyer. Happy Hogan's present for this exchange, which marks the second time Jon Favreau has acted against a Daredevil. He played Foggy Nelson in the 2003 Daredevil adaptation starring Ben Affleck.
Your client, Mr. Lee, he made his first payment.
Well, that's great. You should be very happy.
After learning that most of the villains died fighting Spider-Man in their universes, Ned rushes to promise Peter that he'll never become one himself. That's a reference to Ned Leeds' comics history as the Hobgoblin. Peter's definitely had enough havoc wreaked by goblins, so fingers crossed Ned sticks to his word. In the days leading up to No Way Home's release, Tom Holland revealed he performs a finishing move from Insomniac's Spider-Man game. Spidey pulls a crazy body slam off against Goblin in the final battle. Peter 2 is gonna have to crack his back after that one. Speaking of bad backs, both Peter 2 and 3 are dealing with some issues in No Way Home after years of spider heroics. And just like Peter B. Parker from Into the Spider-Verse, the two Peters do some stretching before heading into battle. Strange traps his failed spell in a pocket universe similar to the ones that recently debuted in What If. Oh, and speaking of Doctor Strange, you're probably wondering why we haven't touched on the post-credits scene at all. Well, it's because it's not a scene, it's a trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The trailer finds Doctor Strange dealing with the fallout of the multiversal upheaval going on in the wake of Endgame, WandaVision, Loki, and What If. The voice of his old ally and current opponent Baron Mordo accuses Strange of desecrating reality, which, fair. Strange seeks out the help of a newly minted Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, in fending off the looming threat. He's wholly uninterested in her mistakes in Westview, but rather her knowledge of the multiverse. Seeing as the last time we saw Wanda, she was rifling through the Darkhold looking for ways to reunite with her multiversal sons, Wanda may be the expert at this point. Smoke surrounds Kamar-Taj at one point, but what if this is actually Alioth? In Loki, we learn that He Who Remains weaponized this interdimensional being to destroy his variant and guard the Citadel. Alioth can consume entire realities, so perhaps he's come to ours to put an end to all this multiverse wackiness going on. We get the briefest glimpse of Xochitl Gomez's America Chavez, the comics hero Miss America who makes her debut in the Multiverse of Madness. It seems she's an ally to Doctor Strange, peering into the cosmos at his side. At one point, we see Strange doing battle in the streets with who seems to be Shuma Gorath, a Lovecraftian old god who made its first MCU appearances throughout What If. but the MCU version of the monster will likely be repurposing the name Gargantos from a different Marvel Comics character if a playset on LEGO's website is to be believed. Mordo tells Strange that he is the greatest threat to the universe, and the trailer's final reveal of a familiar face to What If fans should prove it: Strange Supreme. The corrupted variant of Doctor Strange sacrificed his entire timeline for the chance to save Christine Palmer's life in a universe where she was killed in the car crash that, in the sacred timeline, started him on his magical journey. Strange needed more and more power to achieve this goal and began absorbing anyone he could wrap his bands of Cyttorak around. But he's effectively redeemed by the end of What If Season 1, so maybe we're meeting this variant prior to that redemption, much like the villains of No Way Home are mostly taken from their lowest points. But what did you think of Spider-Man No Way Home? Did it still surprise you despite the fact that you knew everything about it before even seeing it? Are we gonna see Tom Holland's Spidey fight Venom next? Let's hear your best theories in the comments. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode of Canon Fodder. For more Spider stuff, check out our full breakdown of Venom Let There Be Carnage. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.